CPA here. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Let's talk about this 60% cliff. Let's get into this, okay? Because I've read some articles about it, and quite frankly, I feel like it's dramatic. Oh, we got a cliff. Oh, it's all or nothing. Oh my gosh. Part of the reason for that, though, is that the CARES Act did not have any provision in it related to this 25% usage. It was the SBA that came out with that in their guidelines, the interim final rule on April 3rd. And then it kind of grew from there of additional requirements and restrictions, etc. But in my opinion, now that it's in the Flexibility Act, which does nothing more than strike language in the CARES Act and insert language into the CARES Act, I get that it's now feeling like it carries more weight in the sense that, well, now it's in law and it says shall use at least 60% to achieve forgiveness. That is correct. That is correct, but there's nothing new. SBA used the same language, okay? I don't see it as a cliff. I don't see it as all or nothing. The whole point of the Flexibility Act was to make it easier to get to forgiveness. They're not going to do an all or nothing. I think it's silly. I don't mean to be offensive, but I think it's silly to think that that will be the result. And here's why. So we've always had this same requirement. SBA wrote it in the same way. So when you go to the PPP Forgiveness app, we look at page 3, line 10, okay? This is June 5th before we have a new application, but I don't think it's going to change much other than, at least on this calculation, other than saying a 0.6, but nonetheless, it says on line 10, payroll cost 75% requirement. That's what it says on the application on line 10 on page 3, requirement, which is line 1, which is your payroll cost. That's all the payroll cost divided by 0.75. Okay, so for the self-employed, that payroll cost is line 31 divided by 52 times 8. This is on the old application, June 5th. Okay, that's your payroll cost as self-employed. If you're an employer, okay, you are an owner-employee, okay, then you're taking your 2019 wages divided by 52 times 8, old application, okay, plus your 2019 health insurance retirement benefits divided by 52 times 8, old application, plus your employee's payroll cost, okay, plus your employee's retirement benefits and health insurance, okay, for an 8-week period for them, okay? That is your payroll cost, your payroll, your employee's payroll, all those costs, okay? That's your line 1 as an employer, okay? Self-employed, again, Schedule C, line 31, divided by 52 times 8, old application. So let's take a look at that. Let's say the payroll cost, okay, is $50,000 for the employer. I'm gonna do a calculation in a minute for the self-employed. Old application, total payroll cost, $50,000, divided by 0.75 equals $66,667. For the employer, do the self-employed in a second. For the employer, Flexibility Act, June 5th, we still need the new application. We still need additional SBA guidelines. Based on what we know, inserting the language from the Forgiveness Act. That's all that was done in the CARES Act. CARES Act had language stricken and inserted. That's all the Flexibility Act did. So based on knowing that, if the payroll cost, okay, is 60% requirement. So if we take this and line 10 is updated to say payroll cost 60% requirement, line 1 divided by 0.6. All I did here is, this is the language that's on line 10, page 3 on the PPP app. I've put 60% and 0.6 in there. That's all I've changed. This is the language from the application. So if I take that total payroll cost, all the things that I told you that went into payroll cost employers, same 50,000 of payroll cost. Okay, this is not even assuming now we have 24 weeks. This is just same payroll cost. Okay, divided by 0.6 is $83,333. Huge increase in the amount of maximum loan forgiveness. So, employed, okay? So, current, we're on June 5th, okay? This would be the current application, current as in old, okay? The application that we have right now. We don't have the new application, okay? We need that, okay? So, the old application, right, would still say payroll cost 75% requirement, line 1 payroll cost divided by 0.75. On the old application, you took your Schedule C, line 31 divided by 52 times 8, right? That was your payroll cost. That's your payroll cost, right? You didn't even have a choice. Line 31 divided by 52 times 8, boom, that's your payroll cost. Let's assume that that payroll cost is $8,000, right? Line 31 divided by 52 times 8 is $8,000 in this example. Divided by the current, old, right? We're on the day of Flexibility Act, okay? So old, current, whatever you want to call it, is 0.75. That yields $10,667, okay? This is just your payroll cost. This isn't your PPP loan amount. This would be then your automatic forgiveness on the 75% requirement. So now putting in the Flexibility Act, and all I'm changing is the 60%, okay? I'm not even changing to 24 weeks. Why? Because I'm just going to show you the calculation comparing at least one variable, okay? So line 10, if all I changed was 60% in the 0.6. So line 10 of the PPP forgiveness application, payroll cost requirement, line 1 payroll cost divided by 0.6. So all I've changed is what's in red. This is what's line 10 now. All I've changed is those two things. Even if I take Schedule C, line 31 divided by 52, and I still use just 8 weeks, okay? We don't know what the SBA is going to do. It seems logical to me that they're going to go with 24 weeks, but we don't know that. But the questions that I'm getting a lot of is, okay, well, what happens though if it's just still 8 weeks? Well, you take that same $8,000 in payroll costs, that $8,000 being line 31 divided by 52 times 8. Now divided by 0.6, it yields a $13,333 automatic forgiveness, not changing anything but the 0.6. All right, so let's do comparisons. The self-employed, your line 1, 8,000, this is just from the board here before, divided by the new 0.60 from the Flexibility Act would lead to automatic forgiveness of $13,333. Next question is, okay, but how much of my loan will be then forgiven? Well, we know that your loan would have to be $10,833. How would we actually know that? Well, for the self-employed, if we know that line 1 payroll cost for you is $8,000, we're just inverting the calculation. So we would know without a doubt your Schedule C line 31 would be $52,000. It'd have to be, because $52,000 divided by 52 times 8 is $8,000, okay? But when we're looking at your PPP loan, we have to use this same starting number for self-employed Schedule C filers. So what would your loan be? Because if it's $52,000 line 31, well, your PPP loan was $52,000 divided by 12 months times 2.5, it was $10,833. It'd have to be, unless you got some other things in your calculations, you have employees, the bank gave you the wrong amount, whatever, right? I'm just saying, if it was all done properly, correctly, especially after the guidelines put out by the SBA on April 14th, self-employed only got a PPP loan, which was line 31, divided by 12 months times 2.5 for the loan amount. That's the loan amount, right? Remember? So line 31 divided by 52,000, or 52,000 divided by 12 weeks times 2.5 is 10,000. Seems as though you get 100% forgiveness. We still need to see the new application. We still need to see the guidelines, but check this out. I didn't even include 24 weeks. Nowhere in here is a new insertion of 24 weeks. This is still based on 8 weeks. Will we get 24 weeks? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. Because even still using the 8 weeks by just now using the 0.6, the calculation of automatic forgiveness is more than the loan. Okay, now let's talk about the employers. I'm not taking into account the 24 weeks. Why? Because I'm not right now, okay? I'm just doing one variable change, which is the 60%, okay? So I'm just following line 1, your payroll costs at $50,000 divided by 0.6 is $83,333. The thing though with employers is, I don't know where your actual payroll cost is as it relates to your PPP loan. We do know the loan is historical 12 months of payroll cost divided by 12 times 2.5. But when I came up with 50,000, that's just for the example, right? For self-employed, it's an automatic calculation, no change to it. So when I go with 50,000 divided by 0.6, doesn't change that it's 83,300. Everybody still has to contend with line 8. For self-employed, based on this, line 8's irrelevant. What's line 8? Line 8 is all the other expenses that come into play. But it'd be kind of irrelevant for self-employed because their calculation is higher than what their loan should be. So for the employer, all I'm telling you here though is that when you're looking at page 8, 9, and 10, and 11, okay, when you're looking at page 3, where the line 10 is, you would have to look at 8 and 9 and 10 because you get the lesser of those 3 amounts. The lesser of being the loan amount, the lesser of being all the other costs. Okay, so you have a much bigger calculation still to do. You have to do the rest of the application. The exercise of this is to show you, even based on 8 weeks, your payroll being 50 grand divided by 6, you're going to achieve 83,333 of a amount on that PPP application. Now, if you're going with 24 weeks, so if I came up with a $50,000 figure, and that's based on 8 weeks of payroll, well, if you triple that, your 24 weeks of payroll would be $150,000, right? I mean, all things being equal. If 50,000 is 8 weeks of your payroll, then you would assume 24 weeks of your payroll, all being equal, would be $150,000 divided by 0.6, which is, okay, which would definitely be more than your PPP loan, assuming you didn't have massive changes to your payroll. See, it's just not an easy answer for the employer. It's just not. You have to still go through that whole calculation. But the thing to note is that 0.6. Now stay with me, because now I'm going to show you for the employers why it's not a cliff. This is pretty obvious why it's not a cliff for self-employed. How could it be? The 0.6 divided out is going to be in a number that exceeds your loan. Nothing else really matters here, okay, for the self-employed, because of how they're locked in. So here's why it's not all or nothing for the employer. It's not. The 60% requirement, all the language is the same. It's just now 60%, not 75%. The 60% requirement means the max forgiveness is payroll divided by 0.6. It's not all or nothing. It's not, I got a $150,000 loan, and if I don't spend 60% on payroll, none of it is forgivable. It does not mean that if I got a $100,000 loan and I didn't spend 60 grand on payroll, that none of this is forgiven. This is nothing new. Okay? We've always had this same requirement, and it's this. The loan, whatever amount you're going to get forgiven, because you may have gotten a $150,000 PPP loan. You may have gotten a $100,000 PPP loan. But the forgiveness amount, the amount of forgiveness cannot exceed, okay, 60% of payroll. What does that mean? So you take your payroll cost divided by the 0.6, so that your payroll cost has to be 60% of the loan forgiveness. So what you're doing, and you look on that application, you look on line 10, that's where that requirement comes from. You take your payroll divided by 0.6, that's the maximum loan forgiveness, okay? You have to spend at least 60% on payroll. That figure puts you exactly to 60%, okay? Now you have to look at the application, right? It's not all simple. It's not only line 10, right? You got all those other things that go into it for you as an employer. But that's the maximum amount, one of 3 calculations, okay? But that's the maximum amount based on line 10 that you could get forgiven, but that inverts it, okay? So if you spent $10,000, okay, on payroll, you would take $10,000 divided by 0.6, and that would be your max loan forgiveness, because that amount of loan forgiveness would include at least, actually right on the dot, 60% of payroll. So it is true that whatever gets forgiven at least has to be 60% of payroll, but it doesn't equate to a $150,000 loan or a $100,000 loan that doesn't have 60% of it on payroll, that none of that loan is going to be forgiven. It's just that whatever the loan forgiveness is, whatever that dollar amount is, that has to be 60%. Make sense? All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe, and then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me.